Let's go through how PaintForce does its calculations. We're going to create a new job and we're going to make an interior job. Let's select some basic line items like paint wall. Let's enter an input for the walls. We can choose to enter in something like 200 square feet if we're measuring, but we can also select a different type of input. For example, if I see a room and I know that that's about 1 gallon of paint, I can just choose to enter it in by the gallon. For our example, let's switch back to dimensions and enter in 200 square feet. You will see when you enter in the input, at the bottom here, we show labor, we show paint, and we show the total that we're going to be charging our customer. The pricing works simple. We take our costs, which is the labor cost and our paint cost, and we apply a profit margin. You will notice in our settings in the job here, we set a profit margin of 40%. We can change that to be 50% if we need to. We can change our labor cost if we need to. And as we do, all of the items in our job will adjust automatically. Now you might be wondering, how do we know it's $70 in labor and $60 in paint? Well, it's really simple. PaintForce allows you to define your production rates or use the ones that we put together. For a line item like paint walls only, you simply need to answer 2 questions. How many square feet can I cover in 1 hour? And how many square feet does 1 paint gallon cover? By defining those 2 things when we set up our production rate, the calculator is able to track your labor time and cost and your paint cost and gallons, as well as what you should be charging the customer with the profit margin multiplier. So in this example, we can cover 100 square feet in 1 hour of painting a wall. And 1 gallon of paint covers about 200 square feet. So if my labor rate is $35 an hour and I need to cover 200 square feet of wall, my labor cost is going to be $70, 2 hours. And my paint cost is going to be $60 to pay for 1 gallon of paint. If I want to have a 50% profit margin, I should charge my customer $260. If I disagree with the calculator for any reason, I can either adjust my production rate, or if I'm on the job, I can easily adjust these numbers and override them. For example, maybe there's something in the way and there's more preparation needed for this room. So I'm just going to round this up to $100 in labor. And as I did, you can see that the price for the customer changes automatically. Similarly, I can override the customer amount and say $350. Let's take a look at one of these pricing configurations. So if we go to settings, we can go to line item library, and here you'll see all of the line items that you have saved in your profile. Let's find the item we were just working with. This is the form that controls the pricing formula. So we can click here and press edit. Let me tell you the basics about this form. So first of all, here is our item name, right? This is our internal reference to the item, and this is how it appears on estimates. So we can customize that if needed. Now for this type of item, we require an input to estimate. We don't have a fixed cost of $100 per unit. We actually want the option to enter in a dimension or a number of paint gallons. Because this is a wall, this is an area and not a linear square feet unit like trim might be. The customer rate is going to be dynamic based on our input. And here we have our simple formula. We can define here how many square feet can we cover in 1 hour. So for example, we can cover 100 square feet of a wall in 1 hour. If we scroll down here to the materials calculation, we also define the paint coverage rate. This coverage rate says 225 square feet. Simply put, we're just answering the question here, how many square feet does 1 gallon of paint cover? That's it. So if we customize these numbers to whatever rate that we're used to painting in terms of the speed and the paint coverage, our formulas will adjust. Now let me show you a different kind of line item. Here we're going to enter in door. We're going to select this paint door frames. So here you will see that we are not requiring an input to estimate because this is just quantity based. So we can say that for every single instance of paint door frames, we simply want to charge the customer $50. For our internal tracking, we can also say that it takes us about a quarter of an hour. And for the paint calculation, we can say that the paint we use to paint doors has about a 300 square foot coverage rate. There's one additional field here called surface area to cover, which we're basically saying this type of door is about 15 square feet of coverage area. So coming back to our estimating screen, when we use this line item, we expect that it's going to cost the customer $50. And if we have multiple of these items, we simply just multiply the quantity times the $50. We can also see how much time it's going to take and what we expect to pay in paint cost based on the formula we defined. Now I want to show you one more thing. In addition to the base cost of these items, we also can have modifiers. For example, if I'm going to change this back to one quantity, and if I change that this requires 2 paints of coat, and this requires a coat of primer as well, we will see that our costs here are going to change based on the formula. We can also set it up so that the price for the customer changes based on that. We can go back to our configuration screen to see how that logic is set up. Under our labor hours formula, we have this option here to enable the option to add a primer. And if we select to add a primer, we can specify that it's going to take about 75% more time than what we're already spending on painting this door. Same thing with number of coats. We can specify that each additional coat is about 75% more time. Or we can change that to say 50%. So at this point, you probably can see how once you set your production rates, it's quite easy to estimate quickly on the job without having to think about price anymore. And especially if you have multiple salespeople, you don't have to worry about underbidding or overbidding a job because they will follow the structure that you set by creating these production rates. So when I'm at a customer's house and I'm doing an estimate, this is how it might look. I can simply add templates, like interior room here. I can say this is the living room. I can throw in my dimensions here. Paint ceilings, 120 square feet. There's 450 square feet of walls. I'm also painting baseboards. And that's it. I can trust that the production rates that I've set up previously are going to come up with the same pricing that I expect. That's how when you're estimating on the job with a customer, you can create an estimate just in 5 minutes and hand it to your customer, get their signature before you even leave the driveway.